The vast emptiness of space stretched before General Vesthar, an unbroken canvas of black velvet dotted with distant stars that twinkled like pinpricks of light in a forgotten sky. His flagship, the Aggressor, glided through the cosmos, its engine hum a constant, reassuring thrum beneath his boots. The cold, metallic surface of the bridge reflected the dim glow of the control panels, casting sharp shadows across the room. Vesthar's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the holoscreen, his sharp features betraying little emotion. The Youth Empire had conquered galaxies, shattered countless civilizations, and it had never once faced an opponent that had truly threatened it. But Earth, a small blue planet at the edge of the known universe, was different, or so they said. The warning had come from an alien species, the Core, a race renowned for its discipline and cold pragmatism. Their words, however, seemed more like the desperate ramblings of a broken species than a legitimate threat. The message had been clear: do not attack the humans. They will hunt you down forever. The Core had been one of the first to encounter humanity, and their warning echoed through the galaxy like the distant sound of a gong reverberating across space. "General," came the voice of Commander Aliran, standing at his side, her voice a quiet murmur beneath the hum of the ship's engines. "The Council is still unmoved. They dismissed the warning again." Vesthar did not take his eyes off the screen. The Core's plea was buried in layers of bureaucratic disdain. The Galactic Council, with all its bickering factions and endless debates, had brushed the warning aside, as they always did. They had dismissed humanity as a nuisance, a species far too young, too primitive, to pose any real danger. They hadn't yet mastered interstellar travel, let alone the intricacies of galactic warfare. Yet here Vesthar stood, the most feared commander in the Youth Empire, about to lead a campaign against a species barely capable of space travel. A war of convenience, they called it, a show of force to keep the lesser species in line. But there was a lingering doubt in the back of his mind. He couldn't shake it. Humanity had always been underestimated, and perhaps, just perhaps, that had been their strength all along. "Do you believe them, Aliran?" Vesthar's voice was low, almost contemplative, a far cry from his usual commanding tone. Aliran stiffened, her golden scales reflecting the harsh lights of the bridge as she turned to face him. "I believe in our strength, General. The humans are no different from the civilizations we've crushed before. They may have weapons, but they lack the discipline, the resolve, to challenge us." Vesthar didn't respond immediately. He gazed out at the viewports where the swirling mass of deep space lay before him, untouched and endless. The stars appeared like cold, distant beacons, and the silence was deafening. There were no signs of life, no clues to what waited beyond the horizon. He was on the edge of the unknown. His fingers twitched, brushing lightly against the metallic surface of the console. His mind began to wander back to his own past, to the countless campaigns that had shaped him into the cold, calculating leader he was today. He had led invasions against species far more advanced than humanity, and none had even managed to scratch the surface of the U.S. Empire's might. He had seen worlds burn, heard the wails of defeated races, and felt the cold satisfaction of total victory. But the humans, there was something about them. The stories from the Core had left him unsettled. How could a species so young, so raw, harbor such primal tenacity? And what if the Core were right? What if humanity did possess something that the Oost had never faced before? Vesthar shook his head, pushing the thoughts aside. Doubt was an enemy far more dangerous than any opponent on the battlefield. He could not allow fear to cloud his judgment. "Prepare the fleet for the first wave," he said, his voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Earth will fall, just like all the others before it." The command center of the Aggressor buzzed with activity as the fleet made its final approach to Earth's orbit. The stars outside the viewport flickered, distant beacons of light amidst the darkness of space, while below, the blue and green orb of Earth rotated lazily, its beauty almost hypnotic. The planet seemed so peaceful. Vesthar's eyes narrowed. It was a false peace. He stood at the center of the bridge, his posture rigid, hands clasped behind his back. His officers were silent, their faces bathed in the pale glow of the holoscreens as they monitored the deployment of their weapons. "We will initiate the first phase of the invasion," Vesthar said, his voice ringing out, filled with authority. "Target Earth's defense systems. Show them that resistance is futile." Alirun, standing beside him, nodded in agreement, but her eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. Still, she said nothing, instead focusing on the tactical readouts. She had always been a loyal soldier, but even she had begun to question the wisdom of this war. "All units, prepare for bombardment," the general ordered. The ship's massive cannons groaned as they came to life, charging up with a low, rumbling hum that echoed throughout the hull. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of impending destruction hanging like a storm cloud over the bridge. Vesithar could feel the vibrations of the ship beneath his boots, the low growl of the engines merging with the growing crescendo of weapons power. In that moment, something strange stirred within him. It was fleeting, a sensation like the cold breath of a long-forgotten memory. But it was there, something not entirely human. He couldn't quite place it, but it lingered. He pushed it aside. There would be no turning back. The first volley of blasts erupted from the aggressor, a flash of blinding light filling the viewports as the energy surged toward Earth. The planet below, a delicate sphere of life and color, was about to be torn apart. Moments later, the tension on the bridge was shattered by a sudden, inexplicable event. The blast from the U.S. fleet, aimed directly at Earth, dissipated mid-flight. A soft, eerie hum filled the air, followed by a brilliant blue flash that lit up the night sky. The energy shields, invisible to the naked eye but felt in every tremor of the ship's hull, had activated around Earth. "What the—" Vesthar's voice was barely a whisper as he watched, stunned, as the planet below flickered with what could only be described as force fields, their energy rippling and bending the attacks away. "General!" Aliran's voice cut through the silence. This is impossible. The humans have shields, advanced shields, far beyond anything we anticipated." Vesithar's pulse quickened. He had underestimated them. This was not the battle he had planned. He felt the weight of that realization crash down on him like a physical blow. His confidence faltered, but only for a moment. "Retarget the primary cities," he ordered, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "We will destroy their defenses before they can retaliate." But as the energy charges built up for the next assault, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He had just begun to realize that Earth was not like the countless worlds he had crushed before, and worse, he knew now that the humans had been ready for them. The myth of humanity's primal fury was no longer a myth, it was a prophecy. "Commander," Vesthar said, his tone colder than before, "prepare for a long war. This is no ordinary species." And as the fleet regrouped for the next assault, he could feel the air in the bridge grow heavier. The storm had begun. The hum of the aggressor's engines reverberated through the bridge, a constant undercurrent of power as the ship's enormous cannons shifted into position, aimed at Earth below. Vesthar stood rigidly, his eyes fixed on the planet as its azure surface shimmered beneath the cold expanse of space. The harsh red glow of the ship's control panels cast a sickly light across his face, accentuating the sharp angles of his features. The air was thick with tension, and the faint smell of metal and ozone lingered in the confined space. His mind raced. The shields that had appeared seemingly from nowhere were no ordinary defense. They were an unexpected anomaly. Humanity, so far beneath the radar of the galactic community, had somehow managed to leap ahead in technology. The soft tapping of Alirun's claws on the console echoed beside him, a rhythmic beat that contrasted with the mounting chaos inside Vesthar's mind. Her golden eyes, usually unwavering, now flickered with a shadow of doubt. "General, the calculations? They don't make sense. The scale of their defense systems, nothing in the Empire's database suggested this level of sophistication." Vesthar exhaled sharply, the cool air filling his lungs, his hands trembling imperceptibly behind his back. He steadied himself, unwilling to show any sign of weakness. "It doesn't matter," he said, his voice clipped. "We proceed with the invasion. Earth will fall. just as all the others did. We will break them. With a swift gesture, he turned back to the command center, signaling the start of the second strike. The air around them seemed to thicken, the metallic tang of ozone growing stronger as the weapons powered up, each barrel thrumming with anticipation. The tension in the room was palpable, almost unbearable, like the prelude to a storm. Vesthar's pulse quickened as the massive ship's cannons fired. Energy beams shot from the aggressor, burning through the void with precision, their light cutting through the emptiness like a knife through silk. The beams slammed into Earth's defenses, the impact causing a wave of shock that rippled through space, visible as a flicker of distortion around the planet. But the human shields held. They absorbed the blasts as though they were nothing more than raindrops against a stone wall. A low growl of frustration rumbled deep in Vesthar's chest as the blue and green orb below remained untouched, its surface undisturbed by the force of their weapons. The glow of the shields was like a mocking light, the rippling energy a symbol of humanity's unexpected strength. Alarin's voice broke through his thoughts, her words sharp with disbelief. "General, they've absorbed the blasts. Their technology, it's unlike anything we've faced." Vestithar clenched his jaw, his fangs barely visible as he gritted his teeth. "We'll break them. Deploy the secondary fleet. Let's see if they can withstand this." A series of smaller ships detached from the aggressor, their engines igniting with a burst of blue flame as they tore through the void toward the surface of Earth. Vesthar watched the fleet's movements, his hands tight on the armrest of his command chair. The hum of the ship's engines reverberated beneath his feet, a reminder of the power that was poised to rain destruction down upon the planet. Meanwhile, on Earth, the atmosphere was a world away from the cold, calculated precision of the Ust fleet. The air was alive with the chaotic rhythm of human urgency. General Mark Latham, standing at the head of a vast war room, was a far cry from the confident, steely leaders Vesthar had encountered in the past. His posture was taut with concentration, eyes locked on the massive holographic display in front of him. But there was a coolness to his presence, a measured calm that spoke of years of battle experience. He had seen war before, but nothing like this. "Sir," one of his officers called, her voice tight with the weight of the moment. "We've detected multiple energy signatures coming from the alien fleet. They're preparing another assault." Latham nodded, his fingers tapping gently against the table, his eyes never leaving the display. "Prepare the countermeasures. We can't let them break through again." He turned to face his crew, his voice calm but urgent. "We've been given one chance, and it won't come again. I won't let them destroy our world." The war room buzzed with the sounds of humanity's defense systems powering up. The hum of energy gathered, a faint, almost melodic whine that resonated through the room like a song of impending battle. The human fleet, though smaller, was nimble, coordinated in a way that Vesthar had not anticipated. Their warships moved in fluid formations, their weapons flickering to life as they rallied against the U.S. invaders. Vesthar's eyes narrowed as his sensors blinked with alarming frequency. "Where are they? Why haven't they fallen back?" Alarin, standing by the weapons console, let out a quiet curse under her breath. "General, they're attacking. We're reading energy signatures from their ships. They're retaliating." And then, as though the universe itself had decided to shift in a single moment, the human fleet struck. Their ships surged from Earth's atmosphere with astonishing precision, sleek and angular, their hulls reflecting the pale light of distant stars as they tore through space like predators closing in on their prey. Vesthar's breath caught in his throat as the first salvo from the human fleet slammed into the aggressor's shields. The force of the blast reverberated through the ship, the vibrations crawling up his spine like the chill of an impending storm. The sound of the impact rang in his ears, deep and resonant, followed by the shrill whine of the shield struggling to hold under the barrage. "Return fire!" Vesithar shouted, his voice cold and commanding, but his mind was already racing. This was no longer a simple conquest. This was something more. The aggressor's cannons roared, unleashing a stream of energy that cut through the blackness of space toward the human fleet. But again, The humans were ready. Their ships dodged, moving with the grace of wild animals, their maneuvers unpredictable as though they anticipated every move Vesithar made. It was a dance of destruction, each side striking with brutal intent, but Vesithar could not shake the growing sense of unease that gnawed at him. The humans had managed to land blows, direct hits that rocked the aggressor, causing the ship's hull to shudder under the strain. "General, their ships!" Aliran's voice trailed off, her eyes wide with disbelief. "They're not retreating. They're organizing, preparing to strike again." Vesthar's heart pounded in his chest as the realization hit him like a slap across the face. The humans were not running. They were not fleeing into the darkness of space as any normal species would. Instead, they were preparing to fight. Their ships, battered but far from broken, were regrouping for another strike. It was a strategy, a counterattack, not out of desperation, but calculation. "Engage evasive maneuvers," Vesithar barked, his voice tightening with urgency. He had underestimated them. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were fighting to win. And in that moment, Vesithar understood just how wrong he had been. The aggressor's engines hummed again, shifting course to avoid the oncoming fire from the human fleet. The stars outside the viewport seemed to shimmer with the tension of the moment, the cold void of space, now filled with the heat of battle. The metallic scent of burning energy and heated machinery filled the air, sharp and acrid. Every second seemed to stretch, every movement calculated, every decision weighted with consequence. "Prepare for the next strike," Vesthar ordered, his voice steady but with a tremor of doubt beneath the command. His mind spun with calculations, plans, counterplans, yet nothing seemed to fit. The humans were unlike anything he had faced. They were not the easy prey he had expected, and now, he feared, their hunt had only just begun. The hum of the aggressor's engines grew louder as the Usth fleet shifted into a defensive formation, their weapons primed and ready. Vesithar's eyes burned with frustration, his fingers gripping the console so tightly that his claws dug into the cold metal. Every move his fleet made was being countered by the humans. It was as though they had anticipated their every strategy, every tactical play. Their ships weaved through the void with unnatural precision, the eerie silence of space shattered only by the rhythmic blasts of energy and the low rumbles of the Usth cannons. The metallic tang of ozone filled the air, mingling with the faint hum of the ship's life support systems. It was the smell of battle, the unmistakable scent of war. Vesthar stood at the center of the command bridge, his back straight and shoulders rigid, but his mind raced with doubts. The humans weren't behaving like any species he had encountered before. They weren't scrambling, weren't panicking. Instead, they were reacting with a calm efficiency that suggested their every move had been carefully considered in advance. Each strike from the aggressor was met with countermeasures, shields that absorbed the blasts, evasive maneuvers that avoided the worst of their firepower, and coordinated strikes that rattled the U.S. ships to their core. It was as though the humans knew their weaknesses better than the Usth themselves. "Commander," Aliran's voice broke through his thoughts, sharp and focused, yet laced with an unfamiliar tension. "Their counterattacks are more organized than expected. It's almost as if they've predicted our movements." Vesthar shot her a look, his gaze icy. "Then we'll give them something they didn't expect." The word hung in the air for a moment, heavy with the weight of impending decisions. The aggressor's weapons fired once more, a volley of energy that tore through the void toward the human fleet. But this time, the humans responded faster, their warships moving like synchronized predators, their weapons locking onto the Usth fleet with pinpoint accuracy. A blast struck the aggressor's shield, sending a tremor through the ship that rattled the very bones of the crew. It wasn't the first hit, nor would it be the last, but it was enough to make Vesthar pause. The ship's internal alarms blared, the red emergency lights casting a harsh, frantic glow across the bridge. The sounds of warning systems filled the air, mingling with the staccato clatter of keypads being tapped in rapid succession. Officers shouted orders as the ship veered and spun, desperately trying to avoid the incoming fire. The tension in the air was suffocating. thick with the smell of burnt metal and the ozone sting of overworked shields. "General, we're taking damage," Alarin reported, her voice tense. "Their firepower is more focused than we anticipated. The shield integrity is dropping." Vesithar's heart raced as the familiar weight of panic began to claw at the edges of his thoughts. This wasn't supposed to be happening. He had anticipated a swift victory, an easy conquest. Instead, he found himself caught in a war of attrition, one where the humans were not just surviving, they were thriving. Their adaptability was their greatest weapon, and Vesthar had no answers. In the heat of the moment, Vesthar's mind drifted back to the Corps' warning, their cryptic message echoing in his mind like a distant drumbeat. "They will hunt you down forever." The phrase rang in his ears now, its meaning clearer than ever. The humans had not only survived the initial strike, they were calculating, anticipating, learning. Every moment they spent in the battle, every move they made, seemed to sharpen their resolve. It was as if they were evolving on the battlefield, becoming something more. "What are they doing?" Vesthar muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as the human ships maneuvered with an eerie synchronicity. The Ust fleet had the advantage in firepower, but the humans had something more, something intangible. And Vesthar realized too late that it wasn't just technology that made them dangerous. It was their will. The aggressor's sensors flickered again, this time picking up a series of rapid, unexpected movements among the human fleet. Vesithar's brow furrowed. "What is this? What are they—" Before he could finish, a shockwave rattled the ship, followed by the sickening sound of metal groaning under pressure. The aggressor shuddered violently, sending officers stumbling across the bridge as the ship's defensive system screamed in alarm. A low, steady thrum filled the air, followed by a sharp hiss as the pressure began to drop. The aggressor had taken another hit, this one far deeper than the previous ones. "Report!" Vesithar barked, his voice rising above the chaos. "General!" came the voice of the lead tactical officer, his voice tight with fear. "We're detecting a massive energy buildup. Their ships are preparing something bigger." The words sent a chill down Vesithar's spine. Bigger was the last thing he wanted to hear. The humans were not just responding to his attacks, they were planning something of their own, and the realization hit him like a blow to the chest. The humans were playing a different game altogether. On Earth, General Latham stood on the bridge of the Fortitude, his eyes locked on the tactical display. The room around him hummed with activity, but he remained calm, his focus unwavering. Every decision now was a calculated risk, a move in a game that had no rules. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something more, the element of surprise and the ability to think on their feet. "Fire!" Latham commanded, his voice cutting through the tense air like a knife. The human fleet responded in perfect unison, their weapons charging and firing in a synchronized dance of destruction. The blast of energy tore through the darkness of space, each ship moving like a part of a well-oiled machine, a collective force of will bent on survival. The Ust fleet rocked under the onslaught. Vesthar's eyes widened as the energy surged through the aggressor, the ship's shields flickering under the pressure. It was the same pattern. The humans were adapting faster than expected, learning from every mistake and using it to their advantage. Each strike felt more precise, more deadly. They had not just anticipated the battle, they had predicted it. The bridge of the aggressor was filled with the acrid scent of scorched metal and the harsh, panicked beeping of the emergency systems. The ship's walls groaned as it twisted under the strain, and in that moment, Vesthar knew. He had underestimated the humans, and now it might be too late. "General," Aliran's voice broke through his thoughts again, sharper now, tinged with the raw edge of fear. "We're losing control. The fleet is scattering. They're outflanking us." Vesthar's grip tightened on the console as he fought to maintain control. The aggressor's shields were failing, and the human ships were closing in with terrifying precision. His entire fleet, once the epitome of military might, was now unraveling before his eyes. The humans had become hunters, and he was the prey. "Fall back," Vesthar ordered, his voice harsh, more a reflex than a strategy. "We regroup. All ships, retreat." The word felt foreign in his mouth. The Ust Empire had never retreated before, but as the human ships moved in, pushing forward with a relentless determination, Vesthar knew there was no choice. The battle was lost for now. As the aggressor limped back, its hull scarred and bleeding, Vesthar stood at the helm, staring into the cold emptiness of space. His heart pounded in his chest, the reality of his failure settling over him like a suffocating weight. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had turned the tide. And Vesthar had been wrong. The humans were no myth. They were a force that would not rest until the Ust Empire was driven from the galaxy. He felt the first tendrils of panic twist in his gut. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now the question lingered. Could he win this war? Could the Ust Empire survive the hunt the humans had begun? The answer seemed unclear, but one thing was certain. The aggressor's retreat was not the end of the battle. It was only the beginning. The aggressor limped through the void, its hull scarred and battered, groaning under the weight of its damage. Vesthar stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the viewport, but his mind was elsewhere. The air on the bridge felt thick, suffocating, the metallic scent of burnt circuitry and scorched armor clinging to the cold walls. The low hum of the ship's engines reverberated beneath his boots like the heartbeat of a dying creature. The constant beeping of the damaged systems was a cruel reminder of his failure, the warning lights flashing in an unrelenting strobe of red. It had all gone wrong. The humans, those fragile, seemingly primitive creatures, had torn through the Ust fleet with an intensity and coordination that had shattered his confidence. Their defense had been impenetrable, their counterattacks brutal. They had learned too quickly, adapted too well. The aggressor was barely holding together, and the rest of the fleet was in disarray. Vesthar's pulse raced in his chest, a tight, frantic rhythm that matched the chaos outside the ship. "General," Aliran's voice cut through the fog of his thoughts, sharp and anxious. "We've lost contact with half of the fleet. They're scattered across the system, unable to regroup. The humans, they're hunting us down." Vesthar's jaw clenched. He had never faced this before. The Ust Empire had always been the predator, not the prey. And now the tables had turned. The humans were relentless in their pursuit, their ships weaving through space like a swarm of hungry beasts, circling their wounded prey. "I won't let them finish us off," Vesthar growled, his voice low and dangerous. He had led the Ust Empire to countless victories, had crushed empires far greater than humanity's. This wouldn't be the end, not if he had anything to say about it. He turned to Aliran, his gaze hard. "We need a plan. We need to turn the tide, or this ends here." Aliran hesitated, her golden eyes reflecting the uncertainty that had begun to creep into her once unshakable resolve. "We could fall back, regroup. The humans may be strong, but they're not invincible. If we go dark, disable our signal, we could lose them, at least for a time." Vesathar's eyes narrowed, considering her words. The idea of retreat was bitter, a stain on his pride. But with the fleet in such disarray, the option was becoming harder to ignore. He glanced at the tactical display, where the remaining Ust ships were scattered, small and vulnerable against the relentless advance of the human fleet. A retreat would only delay the inevitable. He needed something more. "Not enough," Vesathar muttered under his breath. "We need to make them hesitate, make them doubt that they can win. They'll never stop hunting us. We'll make them pay for every inch." Aliran turned to face him fully now, her claws tapping on the console in a rhythmic, nervous pattern. "What do you suggest, General?" The plan began to form in Vesathar's mind, a strategy both dangerous and desperate, but it was the only chance they had. He looked at the holoscreen, where Earth loomed large, still beautiful in its vulnerability. Humanity had shown their hand. They weren't afraid. But fear could be turned into a weapon. And fear, true, visceral fear, was something the humans had not yet experienced. "Prepare the Vanguard for launch," Vesasthar said, his voice suddenly filled with purpose. "We're going to take them by surprise. We'll give them something to think about, but we'll need to move fast." Aliran raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as she moved to carry out his orders. The Vanguard was the USTA Empire's ultimate weapon, a massive flagship equipped with the Empire's most powerful offensive capabilities. It had been reserved for only the most important missions, its true potential kept under wraps, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The ship's engines roared to life as the Vanguard detached from the aggressor and began its journey toward Earth. Vesthar watched as the massive ship vanished into the distance, cloaked by the void, its signature buried deep in the vast expanse of space. The plan was simple: lure the human fleet into a trap, make them believe they had won, that victory was within their grasp, and then strike. The humans would think they had destroyed the USTA Empire. They would think the aggressor was all that remained. They would think they had nothing left to fear, and then, at the last possible moment, they would realize their mistake. The Fortitude sailed through space, its sleek hull cutting through the void like a knife through water. General Latham stood in the command center, his face lit by the glow of the tactical display, his fingers dancing across the touchscreens as he watched the movements of the USTA fleet. It had been hours since the first strike, and the humans were relentless in their pursuit. Each wave of USTA ships they encountered had been shattered with terrifying ease, the humans' tactics proving more than a match for the alien invaders. "General," an officer said, his voice tinged with concern, "we've detected an anomaly. A cloaked vessel has broken off from the aggressor. It's headed directly toward Earth." Latham's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, cloaked?" he asked, turning sharply toward the officer. "It's not registering on our sensors. The ship's completely invisible. We're getting no energy signatures from it, but our systems are detecting a shift in the gravitational field. It's there, but it's like it's hiding." Latham's brow furrowed. The US weren't known for using cloaking technology. It was a tactic the humans had mastered, not their enemies. This was something new, something unexpected. "We need to find it. Now," Latham ordered. "Prepare the fleet. If the aggressor is down, then what's left must be a final strike. We can't let them turn the tide on us." The human fleet shifted into formation, their weapons primed and ready. They would find the cloaked vessel, destroy it, and end this war once and for all. But Latham had learned long ago never to underestimate an enemy. The sense of unease gnawed at him as he surveyed the empty expanse of space, knowing that something was out there, waiting. Back aboard the aggressor, Vesthar's heart raced as the Vanguard moved into position. The plan was set. The trap was ready. He had made his move, and now it was up to the humans to make theirs. He was certain they would take the bait. Their victory had been swift and certain. They would press forward, hungry for more, blind to the danger lurking just beyond their reach. The moment they tried to claim Earth, the Vanguard would strike. He stood before the tactical console, his breath shallow, his eyes scanning the stars. The anticipation was palpable, a crackling energy in the air that charged every nerve ending, made every thought sharp and quick. The next move was theirs. "General," Alleran's voice broke through his thoughts once more, "we've got a lock on their fleet. They're moving toward Earth. They're falling into the trap." Vesthar's lips curled into a thin, almost predatory smile. "Now we wait." The Vanguard's engines hummed with a quiet, deadly power as it drifted toward Earth, the ship ready to unleash hell. This was their last chance. If they could destroy the human fleet in one fell swoop, the USTA Empire would regain its pride. It would take back what had been lost and show humanity the true power of the Empire. The trap had been set, and soon the humans would realize, too late, that they had made a grave mistake. The cold void of space stretched infinitely before the Vanguard as it glided toward Earth, its cloaking shield in place, rendering it nearly invisible to the sensors of the human fleet. Vesthar's heart beat with the steady pulse of anticipation. The trap had been set. The human fleet, confident and hungry for victory, had pursued the aggressor, believing it to be the last of the USTA forces. They were walking straight into his plan, oblivious to the true danger that awaited them. He stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his claws flexing against the cold metal console, eyes fixed on the tactical readout. The humans would soon be in striking range, and when they were, he would unleash everything the Vanguard had. "General, the human fleet is advancing." Alaron's voice broke through his thoughts. Steady, yet tinged with an uncertainty Vesthar did not want to acknowledge. They're almost at the coordinates. They're fully committed. Vesthar's lips twitched into a grim smile. He could hear the hum of the Vanguard's engines beneath his feet, a low growl that resonated through the hull, the ship's power like a living entity. The plan was flawless. The humans had no idea what was coming. But as the moment approached, something gnawed at him, an uncomfortable feeling in the pit of his stomach, a whisper that crawled into his mind. It was too easy. The humans had adapted too quickly, fought back too hard. It was as though they were prepared for this exact moment. Vesithar shook his head, trying to push the thought aside. The Vanguard was the Yust Empire's ultimate weapon. No one had ever withstood its firepower. Not a single enemy fleet had survived its barrage. "Lock onto their lead vessel," Vesithar ordered, his voice low and steady. "The Fortitude. Target their command center." Aliran complied with a sharp nod, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted the targeting parameters. "Ready, General?" The tension on the bridge was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation. Every crew member stood rigid, their faces illuminated by the glowing blue light of the tactical displays. Vesthar's breath slowed, his pulse steady, his focus unbroken. This would be the end of the humans. A single strike would finish them off, and the aggressor, the last remnant of the Ust fleet, would be avenged. "Fire!" Vesthar commanded, his voice cold. The Vanguard's massive cannons roared to life, releasing a torrent of energy that tore through space with devastating force. The brilliant burst of light, a comet-like streak across the void, shot toward the Fortitude, its intensity blinding in its brilliance. But then something happened. As the blast reached the human ship, the energy seemed to dissipate, swallowed by a sudden, impenetrable force. "What the hell?" Alaran muttered, staring at the readings in disbelief. The human fleet hadn't fallen. They had been expecting the attack. "General, they've deployed their own countermeasures," Aliran said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not possible. The energy shields, they're beyond anything we've seen before." Vesisthar's mind raced. How? How had they anticipated this? His eyes flicked to the tactical display where the human ships were already changing formation, rallying with eerie precision. The Fortitude, despite the near-direct hit, had only suffered minor damage. It wasn't just the countermeasures that had saved them. It was their strategy. The humans had calculated the outcome. They had known what would come next. The realization hit him like a cold, unforgiving wind. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to win. "We've underestimated them," Vesithar muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. His gaze hardened, and his hands gripped the console tighter. "Prepare for another strike. This time, we'll target their fleet's main engines." But as the Vanguard powered up for the next attack, something strange happened. The human ships, though smaller in number, were moving with a cohesion and speed that no one could predict. They circled the Vanguard, darting between the debris of the battle like wolves hunting their prey, their weapons locked on target with deadly precision. "We can't keep up," Aliran said, her voice strained. "Their ships are moving faster than we can track. We're being outmaneuvered." Vesithar clenched his jaw, his thoughts spiraling. He had always prided himself on being a step ahead of his enemies, on his ability to outthink and outfight anyone who stood before him. But the humans were different. They weren't just fighting with technology. They were fighting with their very will. They fought with purpose, with the unyielding belief that they could never be defeated. In that moment, Vesithar realized what the core had meant. "They will hunt you down forever." The words echoed in his mind, now a chilling prophecy, as the Vanguard rocked under the barrage of fire from the human ships. The Ust Empire's pride, the last of their greatest weapons, was faltering, its shields buckling under the relentless onslaught. The Vanguard's once impenetrable hull now felt fragile, as though it were nothing more than paper being torn apart by the human will. "General, we can't hold out much longer," Aliran said, her voice strained, her eyes wide with panic. "The shields are failing. The engines are damaged. We won't survive another round of fire." Vesthar turned to her, his face set in stone, the weight of their defeat settling upon him like a suffocating cloak. He had underestimated the humans. And now, it was too late to change anything. "They are unstoppable," Vesthar said, his voice low, filled with a reluctant respect. "We're not dealing with just another species. We're dealing with something primal, something that can't be destroyed." The vanguard lurched violently as another blast hit, sending shockwaves through the bridge. The lights flickered, and the warning alarms blared, their shrill wail a deafening reminder of their failure. Vesithar stood motionless, his mind replaying the countless moments where he had dismissed the warnings, where he had laughed off the notion that humans could pose a real threat. "They are hunters," he whispered, his voice breaking as he realized the truth. "And we are the hunted." As the final blast tore through the vanguard's core, sending a wave of destruction through its interior, Vesithar's mind went blank. The lights flickered one last time before plunging the bridge into darkness. He stood there, his eyes staring out into the void, watching the human ships circling like vultures around a carcass. The battle was over. The humans had won. And as the ship shuddered one last time, Vesthar understood the true meaning of the Corps' warning. Humanity had not only survived the Yustha Empire's assault, they had become a force unlike any other. They were no longer a species to be underestimated. They were a species that would hunt, that would fight, until every last threat to their survival had been eradicated. The aggressor, the last remnant of the Usth fleet, had fallen, and Vesthar, once the proud general of an unstoppable empire, could only stand in awe of the force he had failed to understand. The humans had proven the Corps' warning true, and Vesthar would never forget the cost of that mistake. As the final echoes of destruction faded, one thought remained clear in Vesthar's mind. The myth of humanity was no myth at all, and the galaxy would never be the same again.